Berlin. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, we are live. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I am your host, Benedikt Hein. So glad to have you. So glad that you're watching this live stream. And thank you all for showing up here and joining us here on this studio sofa. We're doing this from Studio Szene 2024 in Hamburg. The wonderful people from Sound and Recording let us use their sofa here. And I'm here with my friend and co-host Malcolm Owen Flood from Canada.
Hello everyone.
As always. And we are joined today by Moritz Enders, which I'm very excited about. Thank you for doing this with us. Welcome, Moritz.
Thank you. Hello.
So today we're going to talk about mixing. It's something we often talk about on the show, of course, but it's a little different maybe today. We are talking about your specific mixing workflow, Moritz, and I'm very curious to hear about that because as far as I understand, and the records that I know that you've made, and I'm a big fan of many of those, by the way, are like primarily mixed analog, right? Is that, first of all, is that correct? Do you primarily mix on an analog desk and with analog gear in general?
Yeah, sure, I do.
Yeah.
I always have, and probably always will. I tried a couple of times to go in the box, but miserably failed, so I think I'm going to stick with the analog way.
Cool. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about primarily today, and we got a lot of questions on that. And I personally have used a hybrid setup for the longest time, and So I have my own experiences with that and thoughts, but seeing how you mix and then seeing, but also the output that you have and all that, and I'm just wondering how does it work for you in terms of workflow more than anything? How are you able to be really fast and productive while doing the majority of it analog?
Well, like anybody else, you have to go with the times, and obviously I can't mix old school analog and send out a mix and just leave it up for a couple of hours and then it's done. It can't be like that. So I came up with my own recall system, which is a little complicated, a little too complicated to explain in full here. But basically what I'm doing is I still mix in the old-fashioned way, like it always used to be. I use Pro Tools as my multi-track playback engine. Basically, I send it out through 48 tracks to my SSL console. I mix in a very old-fashioned traditional analog workflow with the console, with EQ on the console, with stuff my output gear I have on the inserts. I use the automation on the console. I use the Auxes for reverbs and delays. And whenever I'm fine with the mix, I think I'm done, I will capture everything that I have done, like all the individual channels. Each output of each fader is then going back into the same Pro Tools session. So with one print, I print 48 channels off the console and 32 reverb and delay effect returns, basically. And that will be all captured in Pro Tools session, and then I will change the status on my console, because on the SSL console you have different statuses. You have the mix and the record status, basically. And in the mix status, you get the multitrack goes to the full channel, so you have and the dynamics and the whole channel path, and then. In the because it's an inline desk, it's two inputs. It also has which is basically handled when you're recording. The multi-track return goes to the small fader, and that just goes through the pan pod directly to the stereo bus. So when I change the status and go to the record status, which is my status that I use for revisions, basically, then my tracks, which have all the EQing, all the processing, all the volume automation, everything I did in the mix, goes to the small fader, and I have a small modification on my console which takes out the small fader, so it just goes like a zero, like a summing at zero direct the stereo bus. So the only things I have to recall are the pannings on the console, which I do with the old school SSL computer. So I just I save a snapshot to a floppy disk, and then I can load it, and I see all the pans, so that takes me 30 seconds to recall the pans. And then I have a couple of things on the stereo bus, which is basically mastering gear with switches. So I use a software called Session Recall, where you can have all the few pieces that you have are in your template, and you can dial in the settings. So I even have a template with my go-to, see what I changed in that specific mix. So that takes another 1 or 2 minutes to recall, and then after 3 minutes, I'm ready to go. So a lot of times I mix a full album, and then I collect the feedback over several days or even weeks, and then I make the final touches for the album all in one day. So I recall sometimes 14, 15 songs a day.
Yeah.
No problem. And I still mix like I always have. And
yeah. And so you don't have to undo what you've done to the original, like in the original mix, you just basically bride it here and there, or you can additionally EQ it or whatever, but you don't go back and undo the prints, basically?
Basic anything. So, because it's all in the same session and it's all time aligned, so I can, if somebody, hey, this guitar, or there's too much compression on the room mics, you know, I can still put in, record, and use the original back and use. So I can do kinds of, also replace files like they send me because they retune the vocal. So I have to come up with all kind of solutions that just involves over years and years, and it seems a little complicated but for me it's not complicated because and it's my work.
Of course, yeah.
You know, over the years.
No, I like it. It's kind of like you're just taking a snapshot of your entire board. It's in your session now. You can swap it out with old tracks as you please, or new tracks as you please. It's actually in committing a track in Pro Tools digitally. Really, you've just made a duplicate.
But that brings up an interesting question. So that means you probably, and I mean, I don't know which SSL you're on, but you probably don't have buses. You have the stereo bus, right? Is it like, do you have multiple buses that you use? Because I'm thinking, with that workflow, printing actual tracks, you wouldn't be able to have like a drum bus, a guitar bus, or like these types of things.
No, I do have rounds for that.
Yeah, I thought so. That's why I was asking. Yeah.
It gets a little more complicated than that was really the basic version.
But you just don't. What I'm saying is, like, you don't just mix all into one mix bus. You actually have subgroups. And
no, I
like
do
that.
mix everything into one mix bus, right. So it all ends up in one stereo bus. But I use 4 stereo parallel buses.
Oh, okay.
But it's still very manageable as far as recalls. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. But those parallel things would run in real time? No, you can print them as well, right? Probably.
I do print them, but I also have them as an option as sends in my Pro Tools session, which then go back to the stereo buses, which are part of, I mean, they're on the left side of my console, but they also, because I'm running the original automation file of that song. Yeah. So the fader automation and everything is still running.
Got it.
So,
what made you do what made you come up with this analog workflow in the first place? Was it just because that was the way you learned? Was it because of the sound, or was it because of the workflow and the way you interact with it? Like, there can be various reasons for people going analog.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with computers, you know. I'm not that old.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. That's exactly why I'm asking. Yeah.
I grew up with computers in the 90s, you know. I was making music on computers before I ever touched a mixing console.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I started my career, sounds a little dumb, but
you have a career. You definitely have a career for sure.
I after I finished school, I went to the States, to Los Angeles, and that's where I learned a lot of stuff at the big studios, and that was the transition time, because I got a foot in the door because I was a kid from the 90s who knew computers and who already knew Pro Tools and Logic quite well, and everybody at that time, even the big artists in the big studios wanted a computer with the editing capability of a Pro Tools rig in the studio. And all the big producers and engineers who worked for decades at the big studios were from a different time, and they were masters at recording the old school way and mixing with analog consoles and tape machines, but they felt really awkward with computers. That was really new to them. So they needed a couple of new guys who kind of grew up with computers, who showed them how to use computers and how to integrate them into a studio setup. And so that was perfect for me, because I had a purpose to be in those studios while I was also learning the classic old school way, how to align tape machines, how to track on an analog console, and that kind of stuck with me, I guess.
Yeah. And what happened when you say you failed trying to transition to in the box? Like, first of all, have you really tried, or was it more an experiment? Like, did you want to go into the box?
Many times, yeah.
You really wanted to go in the box? For
No, I never wanted to, but sometimes I felt like, okay, I have to make sure I'm not missing out.
Yeah, right.
I'm not putting myself in a position where I don't have a future because everybody's in the box, and I can't continue to work like that. So I wanted to make sure that I could do it either way, and so I tried it many times. I tried it both ways: remix a song in the box that I previously mixed on my analog setup, and then also mix stuff in the box and then do it on my analog way. And then on a fresh day with fresh ears, I'm big on blind A/B shootouts, and I shoot out everything I do. All the new gear I buy or test, all the always my A/B stuff with the rough mixes and everything. So I have my workflow for doing true blind A/B tests, level matched, of course, so I don't fool myself. And I just always preferred the way I mixed it on the analog setup. So
sonically, or also the way the workflow
I don't even think
feels?
about sonics, When I do blind A/B, I just close my eyes. I do click, 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 click. I like this better or this. This, A or B, A or B. I like A better. Okay, that's...
Okay, yeah.
I do it 10 times,
So you did blind between in the box and analog, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
and
interesting.
that
Have you been faster
though
in the box? Have you been faster, or was it even slower for you?
Mainly, I'm faster outside the box because I'm used to it. To be fair, somebody who's used to mix in the box is definitely faster in the box. I mean, I think mixing on a console is always faster. The time that the stuff that will take much longer is if you run into problems and you have to repatch stuff, and some gear doesn't work, you don't have that kind of stuff in the box.
Right.
Yeah. But you're super slow in the box when your computer starts to break down, and
just can't authorize a plug-in for some silly reason.
So those kind of things
There's this have you seen this thing? Yeah, there's this funny clip of Steve Albini, like rest in peace, where he was walking into. I saw this clip where he was walking into one of the control rooms, and a bunch of people are sitting there doing nothing, and he was asking like, "What is going on here?" And they said, "We can't work because someone forgot the dongle, and they're like about to grab it." And he just laughs. It was like, "You can't make a record because of the fucking dongle."
The USB stick is gone. Yeah.
So yeah, it's the only thing.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you ever have to, I mean, it sounds like the answer to this is going to be no, because you seem to have found workarounds to a lot of like the processes that you expect from in-the-box workflows of just being able to quickly go, make a tweak, no problem. Hey, sorry, one last thing, can you just do this? And email it back to us by, 10 minutes from now. Do you ever have to explain to new clients, like, hey, I do this differently. I do this, maybe it's the wrong word, but old school way, the traditional way.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of let them know, if I haven't worked with them before, I kind of let them know that the best for everybody would be to wait for your feedback, get everybody in the loop who's supposed to give feedback, and then have one guy collect all the feedback, and he should send me emails and not a text, so I have it on my computer and I can go through the list and make sure that, but the less revisions we need, the sooner we're finished with a song and everybody's happy, that's the better for everybody. So if I get the feeling that they don't know that already, and most people do know that, so you don't have to say anything. But sometimes you get a feeling like it's best to give them a little hint, and then I do.
I think that's good practice, regardless too if it's in the box or out of the box.
Absolutely.
Just like consolidated communication.
Yeah.
Because I do probably less revisions than most in the box mixers. I usually average 2 revisions, I think.
Nice.
And I think I never do more than 4.
Right.
I think I can. No, I think maybe once in a blue moon a revision 5, but then something's wrong. But every time I open up a song, a mix again, because it takes a few minutes to do that, and I have to concentrate, and I have to make sure that it sounds exactly the same. I use that time with fresh ears to not only go through their list with minimal level things, I also listen with a fresh set of ears one more time and think about what I have done, or if I could make it better. And usually I add a couple of things that will enhance the overall sonics or the sound on top of their couple of things.
Right.
So
it's a revision for you as well.
Yeah, and I think if you're in the box and you can do it, and and it's so easy for you to open a session. You have it on your laptop, you just open it and you just do that one little thing that somebody sends you on your phone, and then you offline bounce it and you send it off, and then you do 16 revisions, and you don't think about it. You can also do it like that, but I don't even think it's much faster than the way I do it.
Interesting. Would you think, though, that, it hasn't worked for you because you do your thing with your setup, and that makes sense that is the way it works for you, but do you think that it is possible to get whatever it is that you like about the analog sound or the result you get? Do you think it is possible to do that for someone else with a different workflow? I know it's a tricky question, you don't have to throw anyone under the bus, but do you think there are people who get those exciting results without analog? I'm just asking because I know in our audience the majority will probably not anytime soon work on an SSL, and they might be discouraged hearing okay, I guess I will never get good results if I don't mix analog, right?
No, I think it's a.
And you can be honest.
It's obviously it's obviously a difficult. It's not an easy answer for that, because when you listen to music, it's hard for anybody to tell what is the mix, what is the production, what is the recording, what is the actual song. What is it that you actually like about it, and what makes it sound good. It's difficult to tell, even for me, when I listen to some records. But generally, I think sonically, if done right, the analog ways does sound better. And even the big name mixing engineers who started their careers on analog consoles and now mix in the box, I got to be honest, when I listen to their best work, it's the stuff they've done in the past on the analog consoles. Sorry to say, but that is my honest opinion, and I can totally, I think it's up to, everybody should decide for themselves what's their best workflow, what they want to do in their life. I'm totally fine with that, and it definitely can be done any way, I'm sure about that. But if you're talking about that last percent, then I think analog will always sound better if done right.
If done right, that's the thing. And also, I think I totally agree with what you said about those best records of those mixers. I hear the same thing, but I always wonder if it's because that's how they did it in the first place. That's their thing. Then they tried to transition, and it's just not theirs. But then there's others who never tried analog and came up with their way in the digital domain, and maybe theirs would sound worse if they went analog, right? So I don't know, like, but if done right, of course, why would it sound worse with good gear and done correctly? But I still think that there are people who probably would just do a bad job analog because that's not their thing.
Oh, for sure.
You know Zach Cervini, who does a lot of like heavy records in the US and stuff. I think I've heard him say multiple times, he's like, I tried analog, I really wanted to, but I just can't make it work. That's not my thing. I didn't learn it. I just work.
It's a whole other skill set, I'm
right?
sure. Even the fact that you're saying done right implies that you can do it wrong, right? Is there any like common hiccups people trying to jump into the analog world are overlooking?
I don't know. I think it's not that different, you know. I mean, mainly because all the plugins that people use when they mix in the box are basically emulations of analog gear, you know. If they would be totally different and with, just different controls, and of course there are plugins that don't exist in the analog world, but they're very few, and even, just what they do, you can do with other stuff in the analog world. So I don't think it's that much different. Of course, people say you have the gain staging works different, and that is true. Obviously, you don't have to fight noise, and in the analog way, you definitely have a small sweet spot, and that is the biggest problem if you mix the analog way and it's not your setup and you haven't tried it for many times. You don't know its sweet spot, and then you probably mix outside of the sweet spot. You mix either too low or you drive it too hard, and then the audio will suffer.
Totally.
So that's the hardest part.
Right. So that's really comes down to learning your gear.
Yeah.
Right. Your desk and your
just
case.
try it, and then automatically it will fall into your sweet spot every time. I think when I do a mix from scratch, like I don't think about it, automatically I fall within 1 dB probably on the stereo bus, the final level, just with all the 56 faders up. It's always in that spot.
Yeah, totally. I have a very specific or pretty specific question. Friends of mine are Blackout Problems. You know that band. You mixed their last record, right?
We had them on the podcast.
And Mari was on the podcast, for example. Yeah, and I know I've known them and friends of them. We might have probably mutual friends or people we both know probably. But like anyway, they're just one example for this question that I'm about to ask. What about like these modern rock projects that have a bunch of programming, synths, digital stuff in the production where they work in Ableton and all of that kind of stuff? When you get those things to mix, is any of that running in real time still? Probably not, right? It's all committed in WAV files, and like, how do you receive those kinds of sessions? Because you probably, if it's like I don't know about the size of those specific sessions from that band, but let's say a modern session with like insane track count, lots of MIDI instruments, synths and whatnot, you would have to find a way to break that down and be able to put it on your console, and you're probably not running those sessions in real time. So how do you handle that? How do you get those files?
I do. Generally, I prefer to get files that audio files that are printed that I can import into my template. I prefer that over Pro Tools sessions because there's just so much stuff going on that I don't want to get involved in any way, and that just slows me down. So
totally.
I also think that it doesn't matter if I mix in the box or on an analog console. I will always have a little bit of preparation time where I make sure that everything is right where I think the song is ready to get mixed, and that will take a few hours. And on those kind of projects that you were talking about, it can take actually like half a day or something. Sure. But I try to do that on a different day or my assistant does it for me. But a lot of projects I actually do it myself, or most of the stuff myself. But I don't do that on the same day when I mix the song, because I have to listen to the files for 5 or 6, and generally my preparation workflow works without actually listening to the music. You know, it's a lot of making sure that everything is in your template and is prepared the right way. And once it's done, you know, I can start fresh in the morning and just open the session, press play, and start mixing. But so eventually everything ends up as 48 faders on my analog desk, and my preparation is to get everything into those 48 faders. And then I have obviously the same channels for the same kind of stuff, the channels for the drums and the guitars and the vocals and everything, so it's really easy for me to do that. But I mean, you heard that from other mixing engineers who work on analog console. It's the same thing.
I even do the same thing, although I'm working in the box or hybrid, but even then I do it because I don't want to deal with 178 tracks. I want to break it down so I can manage it, and I want to have certain buses, and I want to have it on my control surface. I want to be able to ride faders, and I want to just be able to manage the session. So when Thomas is prepping sessions for me, it's like all grouped and broken down and like easily manageable, and I want to get in and just be able to hit play. So I think it's a smart thing to do, even though if you're not on analog.
Yeah, and the type of projects you've been asking about, those are the toughest to handle, you know, because you know, they're band productions, and then they're modern electronic pop production, and then there's some bands who would like to stay a classic band, so they do their band productions with recording their full drum set, their guitars, their bass, their vocals, and then they also do a complete modern electronic pop production on top of it. So it's actually two productions. So you get 80 tracks of a classic band productions, all recorded with microphones, and then you get 80 tracks of a modern EDM, whatever production, you know. So you have both these double track count, and it's just, it gets tougher and tougher to get into your mix template and get it done. Yeah, cool.
So we're running up to the end of this. Are there any questions? Maybe we can get a couple from the audience. Are there any questions for Moritz? Thank you for sharing all of that, by the way. That was really insightful.
Oh, there is.
Cool.
Mic's being run around to you.
For those watching the stream or the podcast later, while we're getting the mic over there, where can we send people to if they want you to mix their songs? Can you tell, like, you have something we can point people to?
If you want to get a song mixed by me, I think you can probably Google my name and find my management.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
I can totally relate to your love or your decision to go the analog way. I was once, a few years ago, in the United States, and had the pleasure to work on an old Neve console, and for the first time I really understood why it's so much like more pleasurable. And my question would be, obviously, was that a factor that actually you use your ears more instead of your eyes staring at a monitor? Did that play a role at all? Because for me that was a total game changer. When I, just look at this, you can close your eyes. You're doing everything, on with your fingers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the visual. I don't know how to explain that properly in English. I think everybody knows that your sight is actually the stronger sense than your ears, how the human body works, I guess. And so obviously nobody will see your music, and so it doesn't make any sense to actually look, be tied to waveforms and stuff like that. And of course I use meters. Meters are important to tell you what's going on, but that's about it. What I need to see in my music, a couple of bar graphs or VU meters, which tells me what kind of level I'm going. That's enough for me, or a view on a compressor to see the gain reduction. But I don't need to see waveforms. And actually, that's a reason why. Obviously, I use Pro Tools as my playback engine for mixing tracks, other people's tracks. But once everything is prepared, I have I think on a Mac it's called Hot Corner on the right top. When I put the mouse there, the screen goes black, and I have the screen on the side and not behind the speaker or between the speakers behind the mixing console like a lot of other people. So I have it on the side, I have it on a card on the side, and I can make the screen go black, and then I give it a little push, and then it's out of reach, and then whenever I'm in that mode, I probably mix the song in 3-4 hours, and then it's done, and I don't even look at the single waveform. And I really enjoy that because it definitely forces me not only to listen, but to learn the song, Like I also always mix top to bottom, Some people always make little loops, and I never do that. I always mix top to bottom. Like I start the song at the top, I run it down to the bottom, and I try to remember everything where all the transitions, all the elements that come into the chorus or just into the middle 8 section.
Almost like playing an instrument.
It's like, yeah. And then I do another pass, and then another pass, but I always play the song top to bottom and try to learn the song.
So mixing becomes a performance.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Thank you for the great question. Do we have time for one more? Or okay, cool. Thank you.
Hey, so my question is, you work with a lot of bands that are a bit bigger and probably have their songwriting worked out and like arrangement stuff worked out, but how would you deal with like an artist comes to you and asks you to mix something and you're not involved into production, like with, I don't know, the Intersphere or something, and then you realize that the arrangement doesn't really work and the recording maybe there's something not working, so you can't mix it the way you want it. Would you like tell the band that doesn't work? Or would you rather just like pull through with the mix and make it work in the best way it could work? Because I feel like the way you work, all the listening to the records, they're all written very well. Like all the stuff I hear from you is super well written and well recorded, obviously. So I feel like with less bigger bands, like self-producing bands, self-recording bands, oftentimes recording isn't as good, like songwriting isn't as good. So what do you think about that?
I don't even know if that's true, actually. I think a lot of stuff I mix is, I wish that I could have also been a part of the recording process, but I think lots of things are not ideal. And
sorry to sidetrack that just with one sentence. Do you do that sometimes, part of the recording process, or is that something you never do?
also
Good.
produce. I fell into the mixing engineer role mainly because I had a room with the mixing setups, but not a real recording studio. So I just kept, and the jobs kept coming in. But I actually started as an engineer, and then also recorded and produced bands. But I've been primarily doing mixes. But so I generally feel that it's you never know until it's done. Sometimes I get files and think, okay, obviously they recorded that in their rehearsal space and it doesn't sound really good, the raw files, but there's still lots of space for me as a mixing engineer to do, and I really enjoy that. So sometimes it's really great, like especially I much prefer to get really raw sounding tracks, even if you think they don't sound particularly good, like a guitar that is just recorded with a 57, and if you compare it to a guitar that is highly processed through software emulations and all kinds of things, and if you A/B them, the 57 guitars just sounds kind of raw and lonely and thin, and the other guitar sounds really impressive. But for me as a mixing engineer, I can do a lot more with the raw sound, unless the source sounds actually good, and so you never really know when you get tracks to mix. You might think it doesn't sound really that good, but then the mix turns out really amazing. Sometimes you get stuff to mix which is so over-processed and there's no room to go, and then it's kind of tough for me as a mixing engineer because I can't undo lots of things. I mean, if it's all in the files already and it's already over-processed, then anything I do, even if it's the best analog processing, would be just too much. So it's best just to leave it as it is, and then it's kind of not. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? So it's and as far as the songwriting goes, I mean that's That's also very tough to tell. Sometimes a song grows as when you actually work on the song and you mix the song and the sonics get better and the song itself starts to sound better, and then you feel it more, and then you realize this is actually a really good song. And so it's tough to say, okay, this is not on a level where I think I would like to be part of it as a mixer. So that usually
That's good to know.
happen.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Those were the two, I think. Were there more, or like we're
All right.
okay?
All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming here, joining us live. I know that the giveaway, right, Klaus? You're still doing the giveaway? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
you're talking about the Fame
Yes.
monitors, then please go ahead.
All right. I should tell you that if you want to win a pair of studio monitors, you can take a picture, tag Sound and Record, and use the hashtag StudioScene. And while you're then we can repost and share. Against two, it's a pair of Fame. What is it? I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact model.
Me too.
Okay.
Studio monitors.
Exactly. Everyone wants to win a pair of speakers, I guess. So you can do that. And thank you, Moritz, so much
you.
for doing this with us. This was a very